Howdy folks, hope you're all having a good one, and welcome to another episode of Mingles with Jingles. This may be a short episode, because there's just not an awful lot of, aside from the big news, obviously, like the Battlefield 6 demo, or beta, whatever you want to call it, that everybody's been playing, except me, because I don't care. But aside from that, it's been a really, really slow news week. Now, to be fair, I suppose this is a bad week in particular because of the Battlefield 6 thing, to be complaining that there's nothing in the PC gaming news other than, well, two main things. Battlefield 6 news, because Battlefield 6 is huge, and while I have never played a Battlefield game, and I honestly don't really care specifically about Battlefield 6, or any Battlefield game for that matter, I can't deny that it's a good thing that Electronic Arts have proven that they are actually capable of doing what appears to be a good Battlefield game, because if nothing else, it might actually make Call of Duty start trying again. So, this was always going to be a week where the news was dominated by Battlefield 6, and you're probably already, unless you're a big Battlefield fan, sick to death of hearing about Battlefield 6. If that's the case, then don't worry, I've already said everything that I'm going to say about it. There is no more talk about Battlefield 6 in today's Mingles with Jingles video. There has been other gaming news, of course, just not an awful lot of it, for reasons which I'll go into shortly, but there has been other gaming news. It wouldn't be a week in gaming news if there wasn't some mega games publisher going out of their way to be evil dicks, and trying to wrest the title of most evil company in the world from Electronic Arts. Step forward, Nintendo. They're at it again. I know I give Ubisoft and Bethesda and so on, but those two in particular are a lot of shit. Which they deserve, and I make no apologies for it, but they rarely make headlines as a result of their going out of their way to just be deliberately evil. Not never. Sometimes they do. But they don't make a habit out of it. They're usually in the headlines for all kinds of wrong reasons, but those wrong reasons are usually just as a result of stupidity or incompetence. Well, stupidity, incompetence and greed. Nintendo, however, honestly just seem to be going out of their way to paint themselves as malicious arseholes. Whether they're shutting down Smash tournaments, suing people for playing their own arrangements of Nintendo game music, bricking the Switch 2 that you thought somehow you actually owned just because you happened to pay a couple of $100 for it, after you had the temerity to pop the case and dare to take a look at what was going on inside it. Nintendo just seemed to be writing bad headline after bad headline. And they've just done it again. Nintendo have just contacted the organisers of RTA, which is one of Japan's largest speedrunning charity events. And they've wagged their big fat legal finger at them. You see, RTA has been raising money since 2014. So this year's event is the 9th of its kind. So they've been doing this, running these speedrunner events and raising money for charities for 9 years, and Nintendo has never cared. But this year, Nintendo's had enough, damn it. How dare these speedrunners go around raising money for charity and actually making people's lives better without asking Nintendo's permission first. Despite the fact they've been doing it for 9 years and they've never needed Nintendo's permission before, but this year, damn it, they do. On June the 13th of this year, Nintendo sent a memo down into the 7th Circle of Hell to their legal department and issued a letter to RTA, pointing out that the use of Nintendo games by a corporation requires prior permission, and that their previous use of Nintendo games like Mario 64 in these speedrunning charity events was without prior permission and constituted unauthorised use. Now, since RTA want to continue using Nintendo games for their speedrunning charity events, what this means is that going forward, RTA have to submit individual licensing applications to Nintendo for each event and game every year they run this charity event. Remember, they've been doing this for 9 years, Nintendo didn't give a shit, but okay, fine, they give a shit now. Except, of course, because they're colossal dicks, Nintendo sent the cease and desist letter in June, and the next RTA speedrunning charity event is this month, in August. And it turns out that Nintendo, no big surprise here, are just as slow in approving the applications to use their games for these charity events as they were in sending the 9-year delayed cease and desist letter in the first place. So you can relax, kids. You don't have to worry about Super Mario raising money for charity this year. Nintendo has taken care of that. In other gaming news, and this one's great, it's, honestly, this is another one of those things that you just couldn't make up. Does everyone remember Jeff Goldblum's character from the Jurassic Park series, Dr. Ian Malcolm, and his famous quote, "You were so preoccupied with whether or not you could, you didn't stop to think if you should," which is just astonishingly appropriate on multiple different levels in light of the next gaming news headline from this week. Because it turns out, and I am not making this up, Jurassic World has just announced a crossover with Microsoft Flight Simulator. Yes, really. It sounds like somebody needs to put the crack pipe down and step away from the computer. But, I mean, it does actually kind of make a bit of sense when you stop and read the details. You see, what they're doing, and unfortunately, you will need Microsoft Flight Sim 2024 for this. You know, the shit one, rather than the still excellent Microsoft Flight Sim 2020. So there's that. But what they're doing is, it's a lot more than just a scenery pack. I mean, if it had just been a scenery pack, that would have been fine. But it is actually more than that. So they're adding in all of the usual suspect locations. Isla Nublar, Isla Sorna, all the rest of the Muertes Archipelago are getting added in. You can access them by taking a flight from Costa Rica, which itself is getting new scenery in the shape of a new airport in New Marina Bay. The islands themselves are going to have 6 airstrips and 12 helipads if for some reason you decide that you want to go and visit a place where you can get eaten by a dinosaur while you're having a shit on the toilet. Speaking of the dinosaurs, they're introducing a broad range of species: the Apatosaurus, the Brachiosaurus, the Dimorphodon, the Gallimimus, the Mosasaurus, the Pteranodon, not technically a dinosaur, but the Stegosaurus, and of course the Tyrannosaurus Rex and the Velociraptor. Apparently there are also more on the way. So far, so scenery pack. Except there is actually more to do rather than just flying around and looking at the dinosaurs. I mean, and if that's all that there was to do, I'd be perfectly happy with that, because that's basically all that I did when I was playing Microsoft Flight Sim 2020 anyway. Except, you know, not looking at dinosaurs, because you get the idea. But they're also adding in structured activities like guided tour photography, aviation challenges, VIP transport, and so on and so on and so on. So that whole thing is coming out relatively soon, apparently. No firm release date announced yet, and no price announced yet that I'm aware of, but it's not going to be that expensive. It's certainly going to be less than the cost of the full game, because it is essentially just a glorified scenery pack. And they anticipate that you will be able to get your hands on it either this month or near the start of September. I don't know if this Jurassic World crossover alone is going to be enough to justify the purchase of Microsoft Flight Sim 2024, but if you are in the unfortunate position of having it installed on your system, this is at least something good that you can add into the game to look forward to. In other news, and when I saw this headline, I had to double check to see whether or not it was April the 1st. AOL, who I didn't even know was still in business, you know, America Online, one of the earliest, technically, I suppose you could call them an internet service provider, although technically they also weren't, but you get the idea, they're an ISP now. But they've been in business for nearly 40 years. I can remember I used to buy PC and Commodore, actually at the time, Commodore Amiga gaming magazines, and they would have cover discs with an installation of America Online. Because that was basically how they... I mean, we're talking, this shit's been around a long time. AOL were the first big company to offer dial-up internet access that most people could afford. And yet, at the time, they, as I said, they weren't actually an ISP. I mean, they are now, I think. I don't actually know. I mean, I assume they are. Because what AOL did, you didn't actually get access to the internet with an AOL subscription. What you got was access to AOL. They were like their own little internet-gated community. And I think you could get internet access through AOL, but it came with an additional charge or something, or whatever. Like I say, it was a very, very long time ago, and I never had their service because I'm not American. I mean, even though they did offer a dial-up service here in the UK as well, but I can't even remember who my first ISP was. I just know it was an AOL. But they were the first big company to offer relatively affordable dial-up internet access For those of you who don't know what dial-up internet access is, it just occurred to me I might need to explain this, because I've seen videos on YouTube of Gen Z trying to figure out how to use a telephone. You know, the one with the ring dial. So I should probably explain what dial-up internet is, just for the benefit of anybody who's under the age of 30. Dial-up internet literally used to dial up the ISP over your phone line, which meant that if you were online, you couldn't use your phone. Or if somebody did pick up the phone, it would disconnect you from the internet. So, yeah, anyway. Well, AOL have just announced that it's discontinuing its dial-up internet this year. You can still get dial-up internet in 2025. Well, you can't anymore, because AOL are shit-canning it. So, one, I didn't even know AOL still existed, and two, I didn't even know you could still get dial-up internet in America. Well, it turns out that if you're an AOL customer, you can't, because they're shit-canning it on the 30th of September, at the end of next month. The next most astonishing thing to come out of this news announcement is that there are still other dial-up internet service providers in America. What the actual fuck is going on here? Who still uses dial-up in the 21st century? Well, somebody does, apparently. Although, you know, if you subscribe to AOL, not you, not anymore. But apparently, according to the statistics, 3% of Americans still use dial-up internet. And now that AOL has shit-canned the service, there are only 3 remaining dial-up internet providers serving the United States of America. NetZero, Juno, and the ironically named DSL Extreme, who apparently also offers DSL, but these guys all offer dial-up internet with speeds of up to, wait for it, drum roll, 56 kilobits, which is exactly what I was getting on dial-up 40 years ago. But you haven't heard the best part yet. Guess how much you can expect to pay for these dizzying internet speeds from the last 3 remaining dial-up internet providers in the USA. You ready for this? You can expect to pay up to $30 a month to get internet speeds that would have been considered cutting edge 35 years ago. I pay less than that for my 500 megabit up and down. And then, just to add insult to injury, and again, you couldn't make this up, the website that I'm looking at with this data is actually called highspeedinternet.com. And if you scroll down to the bottom of the page, where it lists the pros and cons of dial-up internet, obviously there are lots of cons, not least of which it's 500,000 times slower than the internet I am currently enjoying. But amongst the 2 pros, you have listed wide availability, which is true, I'll give them that. If you've got a phone line, you can have a dial-up internet. But in a service that can cost you up to $30 a month for speeds that are 500,000 times slower on average than the kind of speeds enjoyed by people in most civilized countries, they are claiming that the other pro to getting dial-up internet is a low monthly cost. Fuck off, America. Just fuck off. All joking aside, though, is that, I mean, $30 a month, is that actually considered a low monthly cost for internet access in America? Seriously, I don't know. I mean, I could Google it and look it up, but, well, 40% of the people watching this episode of Mingles with Jingles are from America, and you clearly all have internet access, so, yeah, $30 a month. Is that actually considered a low monthly cost where you come from? Let me know in the comments. Well, anyway, the final thing I wanted to talk about this week, and it's the other reason, aside from Battlefield 6 dominating all the headlines, this is the other reason why it's been a bit of a slow news week this week. And not just this week, because I've been noticing this trend in PC gaming news specifically for a very, very long time now. Because it's kind of been a slow news week every week if you're looking for news on PC gaming. It's not that there isn't any news, it's just that most of the PC gaming news has got nothing to do with PC gaming. It just seems like a minimum of 40%, and sometimes as much as 60 to 80% of all the news that is PC related for a very, very long time now, nothing to do with games and everything to do with AI. And I just don't care. Well, it's not true to say I don't care. I'm not that interested. I do care, because it's getting kind of scary just how good the AI is becoming. Well, good might not actually be the right word. I mean, I'm gonna stick with good for now, and I'll try to explain, and hopefully you understand why, even though I don't actually think that there's much of anything good about it. So, I have a couple of friends who work as games developers, and last year I was having a conversation with one of them about AI game development tools, and he was telling me, and this was a year ago. He was telling me that there were AI tools on the market, right, well, not now, this was a year ago, that could write a game for you from start to finish in minutes. Well, maybe not. Honestly, I don't know how long it took, but certainly faster than any human could do it. Now, when we're talking about an AI-developed game with very, very little human input other than setting the parameters of what the game was supposed to be, you have to understand, we're not talking Cyberpunk 2077 or Baldur's Gate 3 here. You know, AI a year ago still couldn't do that. We're talking about very, very basic stuff. Stuff like Pac-Man or Space Invader or Asteroid. But the AI could do it lightning fast with very, very little human interaction. It couldn't do anything original, because AI cannot do anything original. It can do stuff that looks and sounds original, but it only looks and sounds original because you're probably not aware of the source material created by an actual person that it scraped in order to generate the derivative work that it has created. It's like games developer Tim Schafer said a couple of years ago, speaking on the potential for AI to replicate something that sounded like Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. He said, I was like, wow, that's a really impressive technical challenge. And it does sound like music, and it does sound like Mozart, but also, who cares? Because it's not Mozart. Because AI cannot create anything original. It fundamentally lacks that creative spark. It can create stuff that looks original, but what it's creating is based on hundreds of thousands or millions of samples of stuff that was created by a real person. So a year ago, when my games developer friend was talking about this amazing AI games development tool that could basically spit out working versions of games like Space Invaders, Asteroids, Galaxian, Pac-Man, just based on a couple of prompts, and then you leave it some time, and then it spits out a working version of one of these games. Nothing original about it, but working versions of games that required zero human interaction other than setting the initial guidelines, and you've got a working finished game within probably minutes. Now, no games developer is going to be concerned because AI is pushing out working versions of Pac-Man. But that was a year ago. Let me just divert your attention to the deepfake industry. 6 years ago, in 2019, Corridor Digital posted a video of Keanu Reeves stopping a robbery in a gas station. And it was so realistic that people thought it was real. I mean, that was the whole point. That's why they did it. They were proving exactly what you could do with deepfakes. The thing is, at the time in 2019, the deepfake technology was kind of limited, and so they had to use a whole bunch of visual effects artists' tricks to hide the rough edges, if you know what I mean. So the guy that they picked to play the role of Keanu Reeves, he had to kind of look like Keanu Reeves in the first place, and they had to ensure that his face was framed in a certain way all the time, so they could only shoot him from certain angles, and they had to make sure that his face was framed by a wig and a baseball cap, and then they had to make sure that they filmed it all using really shitty resolution smartphones, you know, the usual tips and tricks that the visual effects industry uses to fool you into thinking that you're looking at something that's real. And the thing is, by the standards of 2019, it really did look real. If you go back and look at it now, you can kind of tell, because of all the tricks that they used to fool you into thinking that what you were seeing was real. The way that they only ever shoot him from a certain angle, and the way his face, all the things that I just described. Fast forward just 1 year. 18th of December 2020. The season 2 finale of The Mandalorian, when Luke Skywalker turns up carves his way through a whole bunch of dark troopers and rescues Baby Yoda. And 40 and 50-year-old men the world over burst into tears because Luke Skywalker's back. And it was amazing. It was the most emotionally satisfying thing I saw in the entirety of 2020, which was a pretty shitty year, and I could have used the inspiration. And it looked incredible. I mean, if you looked carefully, you could tell that this wasn't obviously a 25-year-old Mark Hamill that they'd somehow pulled through a time warp to play his character in the year 2020. You could tell that they were using deepfake tech, but it was very, very good. I mean, we're not talking about shitty 480p smartphone resolution, only shot from specific angles. This was full screen, high resolution. This was quality stuff, and it looked just like him. Almost. I mean, you could tell. You know, we're still in the uncanny valley, but only just. And all of that progress had been made in the space of 1 year. Well, anyway, time marches ever on. The third season of The Mandalorian didn't happen the next year in 2021 for all kinds of, well, fairly obvious, but also not so obvious reasons. The whole story got a bit bogged down in different side projects. But anyway, 3 years later, in 2023, we get the third season of The Mandalorian. And there's a couple of episodes where Luke Skywalker's back. And this time, you just cannot tell that it's not a young Mark Hamill. The tech is that good. It is no longer possible to tell that what you're looking at isn't a real person. So, back on the inevitable subject of AI game development tools. 1 year ago, I'm talking to a game developer, and he's telling me that there are software AI tools available that can basically shit out a perfectly acceptable version of Pac-Man or Space Invaders in minutes with basically zero human input. That was 1 year ago. This month, Google DeepMind just published video footage of their new AI tool, Genie 3, where it rendered a video that runs at 24 frames per second at 720p resolution. Now, if you're sitting there thinking, what's so special about that? AI has been able to do that, and in fact better than that, for at least a year now. Technically, this isn't a video. This is interactive. It's generating a world at 24 frames per second and 720p resolution, which is pretty shitty. It's definitely not anybody would call high res, but it is photorealistic, and it is 100% interactive. It's essentially generating a photorealistic video game that runs at 24 frames per second at 720p resolution. 1 year ago, these AI game development tools were shitting out Pac-Man and Space Invader clones. And now, in real time, they're giving you what looks like interactive police body cam footage. Admittedly, it can only do this for about a minute, and then it all starts going to shit and collapsing and just falling in on itself. But the fact remains, 1 year ago, you were getting Pac-Man. Now, you're getting what's essentially a photorealistic version of Gary's mod. Next year, who knows? Maybe photorealistic cyberpunk. Holy shit. And I don't know whether I'm excited or appalled by the whole thing, but I'm fairly sure it's going to generate some activity in the comments section of this week's episode of Mingles with Jingles. Because, I mean, I can see the good side, I can see the bad side. I just don't know which outweighs the other. So if you have anything to say on the subject, you know what to do. And on that bombshell, that is it for this week's episode of Mingles with Jingles. I thought it was going to be shorter than normal because, well, aside from Battlefield 6 and AI all over the place, there wasn't actually a whole lot of gaming news, but I did find something to talk about after all. And I hope you all enjoyed it, because that's it for today. As always, take care, and I'll catch you next time.